Hi, and welcome to Living Resilient Podcast. Remember, this podcast celebrates everyday ordinary men and women. Today, we're here to celebrate Helen McGilvery. Did I pronounce that
You
right?
did.
Yeah,
It's a
okay.
tricky one.
She's an experienced psychological therapist, which is why we're here to celebrate her really. She's skilled in cognitive behavioral therapy, acceptance and commitment therapy. I didn't know there was anything like that. Interpersonal therapy and mindfulness. She's also the director of Compass Therapy, which is a psychological therapy service based in Scotland. Now, one of her mission is to help individuals develop their psychological skills, build mental and physical well-being, and also increase personal resilience. And that's why I've invited her to the podcast today, because the podcast is all about resilience. So, Helen, thank you so much for coming all the way,
Oh, you're
and
welcome.
welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Emma. It's really nice to be here.
So what we usually start with before we get into the details of, what you do in terms of therapy, resilience, mindfulness, we always want to get to know our guest. So when you're not doing all what you're doing in terms of therapy and helping people, who would you say Helen is?
I guess Helen is a mum. I have two teenage girls, wonderful girls. I'm a partner to Bob. I live in the Highlands of Scotland in a place called Lochinver, and I moved there during the pandemic to follow my heart, to do the things that make my heart sing, which is be outside, be up a mountain, be in the water. So I think I've got an adventurous spirit, I would say, as well as all the caring stuff which comes with my job. I've got a good bunch of friends and caring family, and I love just being around people.
Okay. So how has your background, your upbringing, how has that shaped who you are today?
So I guess I was brought up in the Highlands of Scotland. I lived in Edinburgh for most of my adult life when I went to do what was nursing I started with. But my upbringing in the Highlands with parents who very loving, very caring. I guess they didn't expect much of me other than to be a good girl. You know, the sort of stereotypical female roles that we might fall into, the sort of gender stereotype. A good girl, a kind girl, maybe not shout about my achievements. In fact, that would be the wrong thing to do. Kind of be seen, not heard. Don't brag. Don't push yourself. Just, have an easy. I think they just wanted me to have an easy life. They've worked hard, and so I guess I just picked up that to be validated and to get care, I should be a caring, loving, kind person.
So was this the culture? I mean, it's interesting that you said that. Is this how it was back in the day? So like we're looking at some years back. Was this how the culture in Scotland or Western countries was, where, like you said, the girl, you shouldn't be an overachiever.
Yeah.
You don't brag about, what you've accomplished, because it's I can relate to it in some certain ways coming from, where I come from in Africa. So I'm surprised to hear that at some point that used to be the culture or norm.
I mean, I guess that's what I have to compare it to. I mean, my family, my parents didn't go to university,
Okay.
very much working class people, and I guess their family as well. My experience was of that. But then if I was to speak to maybe some of my friends, maybe they would have a slightly different experience.
Okay.
But I think in general, women of that generation, of my generation, I guess we didn't go into things like STEM, science, and we didn't do that. It wasn't expected of us. We weren't expected to do well. And I think the undertone was always, well, you'll meet a man he'll provide for you. And that's, my mum would always say things, and, I really don't, my mum did the absolute best she could.
Of course. Yeah.
But she would say, oh, so and so's done well. She's now married and they're doing well. That to them, having a family and a home and a
Yeah.
nice garden and doing your washing and having a tidy house. These are important to them, that sort of family home. And I guess I just picked up on that. And I don't think that would be unusual for women in Scotland of my age.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think, like you said, we can only teach people, based on our own understanding and the environment at that point in time. So obviously at that point, that was, her level of understanding. That was the best, get what I mean, she could offer. So it's just, interesting, looking at, our generation, I would say, and then now, where it's completely
Very
different.
different. Thank goodness.
Completely different. Yeah, I know. I have these conversations with my kids, and I can see that generational the gap or difference where you're saying one thing but they can't relate to it. It's different.
Yeah,
So even the communication,
yeah, very
it's
different.
it's a problem. Okay, so was that in any way linked to why you went into nursing? What you're doing now? Is there any link
I
to?
definitely think there's a link there. What I really wanted to do was art.
Oh, really? That's completely different
Yeah,
from what you're
that's what I
doing now.
really wanted to do.
Okay.
But in order to go, well, my sister never went to university. So, and so I studied art and everything in school and I really enjoyed it. And I just felt, I don't know, a message I got was, well, you're not really good enough. So we're not, we can't really afford to put you to art school. And then we went on a school trip to the local hospital in Inverness and I thought, oh, look at these people with their uniforms, and that's all very exciting. And oh, you get paid to do nursing. I thought, here's my ticket out. So,
Okay.
and I was interested in it. I thought, oh, this is exciting, caring for people. This is a woman's thing to do. So I guess it did, but also knowing that I could care for people. I was a kind person. So it felt comfortable maybe
Felt
for me
right.
to do
Yeah.
that.
It felt right. Okay. So so you decided to go into nursing.
Yeah.
At what point did you advance or expand to
To
go into,
therapy.
to therapy?
So I started nursing when I was 19, very young. And I was a general nurse, and
Okay.
I moved through that, and then I qualified, and I worked in critical care. I was an intensive care nurse for years. I worked in liver transplant and kind of really high, very seriously ill patients. Loved it. I think I was a very good nurse.
Okay.
But what I began to discover was that I was more interested in talking to people. You can't really do that when you work in critical care because often they're sedated,
Yeah.
ventilated. So I would be interested in talking to the relatives or, kind of supporting people through that. And all the kind of fancy high tech stuff didn't really appeal to me. So I thought I was actually going to leave nursing altogether and do something completely different. But then I thought, well, I've spent all this time training. What could I do? So at that time could convert to mental health.
Okay.
So although I did my full nursing degree in general nursing, I then did a short, well, it was an 18-month conversion course. So I went into mental health, but I thought I am not working in one of these psychiatric hospitals. Went really against everything I stood for, treat it how you would treat people.
Okay.
So from there, I went to work in the voluntary sector. I went to work with people who use substances, drugs, and mainly drugs, kind of opiate use. And I did at that time it was a Macmillan course about care of the dying. So I did a counselling course through them, and then I started working with people with HIV and AIDS.
Okay.
And I did various counselling courses through them. So I just gradually sidestepped. And then I worked in primary care, which is where you work with GPs as a community psychiatric nurse.
Okay.
And then I got offered, I was very lucky, I was one of the first nurses to be offered a place on the cognitive behavioural therapy course.
Okay.
So it was just kind of timing, really. So that was in the late 90s, and I've just kind of worked in it ever since.
Okay.
So I kind of sidestepped into psychology from
being a nurse.
from being a nurse.
Okay. Now you're making it sound very easy, Helen. I've done this and then you went to this and then transited to this. What I want to know about the challenges. Has it all been rosy? Has it been a
No.
rosy journey all along? So what are those really difficult moments? What are the, I want us to touch upon the difficult moments you went through, experiences you went through, the point in time where you were at the verge of giving up.
There's been a few of those.
Yeah, maybe
Yeah.
just one or two.
Yeah.
But
Um,
the
I
one that really stuck the most.
okay, I think there was one moment, and it was when I was actually first in nursing. I was young, I was 19, 20, and my sister, who was back in the Highlands, got married to the love of her life, and he died really suddenly at home. And I was at home that time, and he was rushed to the hospital. I mean, I just knew because of my experience that it was really scary. So I'd kind of moved through life not having any major incidents or any significant trauma um, until this moment. And I just knew by the way things were happening that something bad had happened. So we arrived at the hospital and I heard them talking and I knew the language because it was kind of this
Yeah,
code.
yeah.
So I knew that my brother-in-law had died. And I could just really, and I think this was a really pivotal moment in my life and how I probably then made the rest of the decisions going forward, that I kind of had to be the one to hold it together for the family.
Okay.
And we were walking through the hospital, and I still knew that my brother-in-law was dead, and everyone was just, oh, he's just had a incident, and it'll be fine. And then my sister came in, and my mum and dad were there, and his parents were there, and they said, they did all the he's dead, and this woman, she was the matron of the hospital, pulled me aside and was really stern and said, if you're a student nurse, I don't know why you're crying. You need to hold it all together now because you need to help these people. And I just remember, well, at the time I didn't even think about it. I thought, oh, okay, that's what I need to do. Like that's so I suppressed all my emotion.
Yeah, I couldn't even grieve at that point.
And I guess it wasn't all about me, but I was really told, zip it up.
Yeah.
That was very
Oh
harmful.
boy.
Yeah, and if I could go back in time now, I think I would be having a word with that
The
matron.
lady, yeah.
And then there was another incident in the hospital at the same sort of time when I worked in Edinburgh, where so it was my 21st birthday and it was Christmas Eve because my birthday's on Christmas Eve.
Oh, okay.
And I saw the most horrific death that I think you could ever imagine. I'm not even going to go into details about
Please
it.
don't.
But it was awful. And this was a better experience actually. That was an awful experience. But then this he was like the nurse manager for the whole hospital. It was the middle of the night and it was it was awful. And he kind of took me out because I think he could see how traumatized I was. And he took me into a room and he made me a cup of tea. And he was saying, this is not something you're going to see. He really talked me through it. And I thought, that's the sort of nurse that I want to be. So those two very different experiences kind of shaped me and my choices, actually.
Oh, that's really, thank you for sharing that. But yeah, I can imagine two different experiences and different outcomes and the impact, each of them had on you.
But also being in that caring profession and never having, I think a lot, you go into nursing and you haven't got had any problems or any life incidents, and you're then expected to deal with so much. So to have that experience from a personal perspective was actually really helpful for me. It helped me kind of think about what I was doing and how I was coming across.
Okay, I want to ask a question now based on your experience. So this happened a while back when you were still quite young. Now, Helen, in this day, the present Helen, how would you have dealt with such a situation? I want you to talk about in relation to resilience. So if people lose their loved ones or something terrible happens, how would you handle it in such a way you encourage or, I don't know, help the person in building resilience? How do you think?
Well, I certainly wouldn't tell them to
To shut up.
suppress their emotion and get on with it. I
Okay.
think I would say quite the opposite. I think in our culture, in a Western culture, we're all too good at saying, oh, it'll get better. Time will pass. I would say nothing like that. I would say, I'm here for you. You grieving is normal. It's uncomfortable. You're hurting. That's all part of this process. Life, I guess if you look at the Buddhist tradition, which I'm not, I'm not really a spirit. Maybe I'm spiritual, but not significantly. But they say life is about suffering, and the more you suffer, the more you can experience joy.
Yeah.
So very, very different.
Would you say it is a cultural thing, Western world here, for people not to cry when they grieve? Because where I come from, Helen, oh my God, they would wail, they would roll on the floor. You hear people screaming. If you get into a house where someone has, died, a mourning house, you would know from the gate.
That there was something going. I
Yeah,
would say
because
that's
people will be
brilliant.
crying, and shedding tears. But I notice here is not. Yeah, you go to funerals and everybody's like self-composed, and I'm like wondering, my God,
Stiff upper lip.
Yeah.
You just get on with it. Just get on with it. It'll get, time will pass. And I just think we can't process things if we don't connect it with the appropriate emotion. So here in this country, I think we're just so used to suppressing emotion. We're not processing things, and mental health problems are hugely on the increase. We're told it's a really bad thing to have, but I guess now as well, we live in a life where we've got this kind of Instagram.
Yeah.
So we can only have the positive emotions. And we're not, it's not good to moan or to talk about your feelings or to be upset.
Or people use those devices as a escape route, but they're not really helping. Like
No.
you might really feel down or sad, and then you just go to the social media thinking.
It's avoidance of
Yeah,
emotion.
exactly. Yeah, avoiding it.
Humans are conditioned to have, to move towards feeling good and feeling, and we're kind of conditioned to move away what we perceive as bad. But the more we just allow a big breadth of emotions, the more we can feel all the emotions. It's better. But yeah, this Western culture and suppressing emotion, just yeah. I think that the figures speak for themselves.
Yeah.
Really, don't they?
Okay. Yeah. Okay. That's interesting to know. But thank you for sharing that. So let's go a bit more into resilience, what you do. So you're a therapist, you speak to people about physical, mental well-being. I want to understand, and I want the audience to understand, what's the connection, correlation between being mentally fit, mindfulness, stress, and resilience. So, because this podcast, we are trying to encourage, resilience, bringing in people to speak about resilience and all that. From your own expertise, you've dealt with so many people, I can imagine. What would you say is that connection between mindfulness, stress, and resilience?
That's quite a big one to unpack. But what I teach people, what I teach people is to be psychologically flexible.
Okay.
Okay, because what we were just talking about there is that generally we're quite rigid, and we try and keep our emotions stiff out. It's kind of trying to keep a lid on everything, and that rigidity, or even that kind of, we create rules for living. Like, I must present a good face.
Exactly.
I must. So again, these rules for living could be very rigid. They keep us very rigid. So what I teach people is to move towards being a bit more flexible, allowing emotions to come. Resilience is also interesting because it seems to be something that people want. We want to biohack our way to resilience, but we need to trust in ourselves and our own bodies. And this is where mindfulness comes in, that our bodies are amazing. We are primed, ready to survive. We survive any situation until we die, essentially, don't we? We have our vagus nerve, which is very switched on. It gets called the wandering nerve, kind of goes down over the front of your body, and it kind of, it's a bit of an alarm for when we need to be aware. And so we don't need to really be resilient. We are resilient. And I guess we need to, I support people to get to know themselves better and trust in their own instincts, and trust that, we can get through struggles, and struggles are part of life.
Okay.
So the more we try and suppress, the more it kind of continues. Does that make any sense?
No, it does. But I mean, I know you made a comment about we don't need to be resilient. Resilient, we are, but people still don't know how to cope
Mm-hmm.
with life struggles.
Or they think they don't know how to cope with
Okay,
life
that's a
struggle.
good way of putting it. Or they think they don't have the necessary maybe support or
Yeah,
equipment or whatever.
yeah.
It
Or
could
the
be financial.
biohacking thing.
Yeah, exactly. So what would you say to such a person, or how would you speak to such a person? Because I know resilience is part of adapting, right? And as human beings, we do adapt. Yeah. But sometimes even in that adaptation, it's very difficult, it's very painful, it breaks you. So I want you to, I don't mean in a simple way, how do you get to, maybe encourage someone or tell someone, I mean, you can do this, hang in there or something, even if every picture, everything around the person is negative.
And that's kind of what I work with all of the time. So I guess typically when people come to see me, they have these stories about themselves where I'm, they'd be having thoughts I can't cope.
Yeah.
Um,
Because sorry, because there's one thing, I mean, I know we adapt and all that, but it's really, really difficult when you're in a situation and you don't see,
you
immediate,
can't see the wood for the
exactly,
trees.
nothing. I mean, how do you
So
start to speak to
that's
such a person? Because it's really difficult.
But that's the nuts and bolts of therapy. I guess you're teaching the psychological skills to enable that person to step back from there's a process called, this is therapy speak, but self as context. So it's how you see yourself in the context of the situation you're in. And I guess what we do is we kind of view the world through different lenses,
Yeah.
don't we? And sometimes if we're in the middle of something really awful and difficult, we're kind of viewing the world through that lens. But we haven't always viewed the world through that lens, and there is other parts of us. So through teaching kind of mindfulness skills and self-awareness, you can help that person see that, here's me having these thoughts, having these feelings, but there's also been times in my life where I've had different thoughts and feelings,
Okay.
and this will pass. And I may be feeling weak at the moment, but there are times I've been strong. So I guess it's just kind of building up that picture that you're not always that framework that you've created for yourself, and that you do have the ability to tolerate difficult thoughts and feelings, and you can build the skills to step back from that and see that.
What would you say are the three, or I know there would be lots of, but just three key, will I use ingredients, three main things or aspects of resilience? What would you say those three things are?
Awareness,
Okay, awareness.
understanding your values and what matters to you, and just trusting in your body to kind of guide you and keep you safe.
Okay. Okay. So sorry, let's go that over it again. So awareness, so being aware, so that's part of mindfulness,
Yeah,
right?
so being self-aware, so
Okay.
noticing your thoughts, your feelings, your triggers.
Okay, that's
Yeah,
a good point. Yeah.
yeah.
Okay, understanding that. Okay, and the second point.
Was understanding your values, so knowing what matters to you,
Yeah.
what
Okay.
in life. That's why my business is called compass therapy, because it's kind of using your values to guide the direction, the choices you want to
That's a
make in
good
life.
one.
Yeah.
Okay.
Because if you live your life through your own values, through your own heart, you're more likely to behave the way you want to behave.
Yeah. Well, that's a very powerful one. I like that. And I can relate with that. Okay.
Yeah.
And that's the second one, values. And then the third one,
The third one, what did I say? Trust in your
trust in
body.
your body.
So that it kind of goes back to the mindfulness and the knowing your body. But we have an inbuilt, we the type of therapy I do is kind of evolutionary psychology. So we are very primitive. Our brains, our bodies are there to keep us safe, and we sometimes just need to trust in the process. An example would be red flags. Everyone's talking about red flags these days. But that's your gut feeling, isn't it? Yeah, and I guess we have these inbuilt I sometimes say to my patients, it's like a little lighthouse that we have that's kind of
Yeah,
constantly
yeah,
scanning
yeah.
out for, and often because our modern world is so advanced and so fast paced, we're in automatic pilot
Most of the time.
most of the time, and more so now than we ever were, because we've got all these distractions and things that
Exactly.
keep us busy. So,
Mm.
and so we override. So when I see patients, I'm kind of teaching them to kind of check in with their body again and trust that their body
Yeah.
will help, you know, because resilience, when we do things that are important and difficult, it feels unpleasant, but we do it because it matters. So that's your value space.
Thank you so much. I like that what you said at the end, or the 3 points. Thank you for coming once again, Helen. So before we round up, what key message would you give someone? So let's say someone's listening to you right now. What key resilience message would you give the person?
Just trust yourself, trust your body, trust the process. Ask for help. That's always okay. Um, yeah, that would be my thing.
Thank you so much. And if someone wants to reach out to you,
Mhm.
what's the best way they
You
can reach
can
you?
contact me through my website at Compass Therapy. All my details are on there. Or through OK Positive as well. That's a mental health app that I'm involved in.
Okay.
Yeah,
I'll put the link. I'll put the link down
fab.
at this the session. So thank you so much, Helen. And that's all what we have for you today. Thank you for staying till the end of the podcast. And please, if you do have a story you want to share, remember it's all about encouraging people, educating people, and enlightening people. So if you have a story you want to share, send me an email and I'll reach out to you. Thank you and see you in the next episode. Bye.